The mechanic and the secret millionaire. The golden hour light filtered through the open bay doors of Chen's auto repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor scattered with tools and spare parts. The small garage sat at the edge of town, where the suburban streets gave way to farmland and the pace of life moved a little slower. David Chen wiped his hands on an old rag, the familiar smell of motor oil and metal filling the air around him as he finished up the last repair of the day. At 32, David had been running the family auto shop for nearly a decade, ever since his father's retirement. It wasn't glamorous work, oil changes, brake repairs, and the occasional engine rebuild, but it was honest work that served the community. His customers were mostly local folks who needed reliable service at fair prices, and David took pride in treating everyone with the same respect, whether they drove a luxury car or a 20-year-old pickup truck. The sound of an expensive engine pulling into his lot made him look up from the workbench where he was organizing his tools for the next day. Through the bay door, he could see a sleek silver Bentley Continental coming to a stop near the service area. The car was pristine, the kind of vehicle that probably cost more than most people made in 2 years, and it looked completely out of place in his humble repair shop. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a young woman who looked just as out of place as her car. She was blonde, probably in her mid-20s, wearing designer jeans, expensive-looking boots, and a fitted tank top that suggested she was used to finer things. But what struck David immediately wasn't her obvious wealth. It was the look of genuine distress on her face. Her name was Sarah Martinez, though she went by her middle name, Elizabeth, in most social circles these days. The expensive car and designer clothes told only part of her story. 3 years ago, Sarah had inherited a substantial fortune from her grand-aunt, a woman she had barely known but who had left her entire estate to the only family member who had ever shown her genuine kindness. Overnight, Sarah had gone from working multiple jobs to pay for college to having more money than she knew what to do with. The wealth had changed her life in ways both wonderful and complicated. She could travel anywhere, buy anything, and never worry about bills again. But it had also isolated her from the normal experiences that most people her age took for granted. People treated her differently when they learned about her money, and she had grown cautious about forming genuine relationships. "Excuse me," she called out as she approached the garage, her voice carrying a nervous edge. "Are you still open? I know it's getting late, but I have a problem with my car." David set down his tools and walked over to her, noting the way it seemed to be fighting back tears. "Sure, no problem. What's going on?" "I think I have a flat tire," Sarah said, gesturing toward the Bentley. "I was driving back to the city when I heard this awful noise, and the car started pulling to one side. I've never had anything like this happen before, and I honestly don't know what to do." David walked around to examine the car and immediately spotted the issue. The front passenger tire was indeed flat, and he could see a small nail embedded in the tread. It was a simple fix, the kind of thing that happened to drivers every day. But he could tell from Sarah's expression that this felt like a major crisis to her. "You're right about the flat," he said gently. "But don't worry, this is actually a pretty easy fix. I can patch the tire and have you back on the road in about 30 minutes. Sarah's relief was immediate and obvious. "Really, you can fix it that quickly? I was so worried I'd have to have it towed or, I don't know, I've never dealt with anything like this before." There was something endearing about her honesty, David thought. Despite her expensive car and clothes, she seemed genuinely vulnerable and grateful for his help. Many people with luxury vehicles expected special treatment or acted entitled, but Sarah just seemed like someone who was in over her head with a problem she didn't understand. "Have a seat inside if you'd like," David offered, gesturing toward the small office area. "There's coffee and some magazines." This won't take long, but Sarah chose to stay and watch as he worked. She asked questions about what he was doing, seemed genuinely interested in learning about tire repair, and made conversation that was surprisingly down-to-earth. She asked about the shop, how long he'd been in business, and what it was like running a family business. Her questions seemed sincere, not like someone making polite small talk while waiting for service. As David worked, removing the tire and preparing to patch it, Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. There was something calming about watching someone who clearly knew what they were doing, someone who took pride in their work regardless of how small the job might seem. David's competence and quiet professionalism reminded her of values she had grown up with before her life had become complicated by wealth and the expectations that came with it. "You're really good at this," she observed as David efficiently sealed the puncture and prepared to remount the tire. "Have you been doing this kind of work for a long time?" "Since I was a teenager," David replied, using the tire iron to secure the wheel. "My father taught me everything I know about cars. He always said that taking care of people's vehicles was about more than just fixing machines. It was about helping people get where they need to go safely." Something in his voice, the respect he had for his father and for the work itself, touched Sarah in a way she hadn't expected. "That's a beautiful way to think about it," she said quietly. When the repair was finished, David lowered the car and gave the tire a final check. "All set," he announced. "The patch should hold just fine, but Keep an eye on the tire pressure over the next few days, just to be safe. Sarah reached into her purse to pay, and David could see her hesitation as she looked through what appeared to be a very expensive wallet. Finally, she pulled out a credit card. "What do I owe you?" she asked. $25, David said. "That covers the patch and the labor." Sarah stared at him for a moment, clearly surprised. "That's all, for all the work you did, and staying late to help me," David shrugged. "It's a simple repair. I don't charge people more than what the work is worth." Sarah handed him her credit card, and as David processed the payment, he couldn't help but notice the name on the card, Sarah E. Martinez, but it was the type of card that caught his attention, a black card that he recognized as the kind reserved for people with significant wealth. When he handed the card back to her, their eyes met, and Sarah realized he had noticed it. "I should tell you something," she said, her voice softer now. "I'm not exactly what I appear to be. I mean, I am, but I'm also not." David waited patiently for her to continue. 3 years ago, I inherited a lot of money, more than I ever expected, or knew what to do with. Since then, most people treat me differently when they find out. They either want something from me, or they assume I'm just another spoiled rich person who doesn't understand how the real world works. She paused, looking down at her hands. "But you just saw someone who needed help with a flat tire, and you treated me like any other customer. You charged me fairly, you were patient with my questions, and you didn't make me feel stupid for not knowing how to handle something so simple." David considered her words carefully. "Money doesn't change the fact that everyone deserves to be treated with respect," he said finally, "and everyone has things they don't know how to do. That's why we help each other." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile she had felt in weeks. "Would you mind if I asked you something? Would you be willing to have coffee sometime? Not because I want to pay you back or because I feel obligated, but because I'd like to get to know the person who runs a business based on helping people get where they need to go safely." David looked at her thoughtfully, seeing past the expensive clothes and luxury car to someone who seemed genuinely lonely and looking for authentic connection. "I'd like that," he said. "There's a good diner in town that makes excellent coffee. Nothing fancy, but the people there are real." As Sarah drove away that evening, her tire properly repaired and her spirits lighter than they had been in months, she realized that sometimes the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought. Sometimes they came from the kindness of strangers who saw you as a person first, regardless of what you owned or where you came from.